Welcome to part 2, I guess. This is another Stihl blower. It's a, can't really read it. I think it's a BG65. Said it wouldn't run, tried to crank it, the customer did, and it wouldn't run. And I've just, off camera, I pulled on it a few times to see what it was doing. And the throttle is real sticky. When you squeeze the throttle, it's really delayed on coming back down. So it's a lot of gunk built up inside the carburetor, I think, on that butterfly, just making it real hard to come back open. When I was pulling on it, smelled the gas and everything. Gas is good. Ended up it started up, and it didn't want to run at first. It would bog out on the throttle, and I should have filmed it. But the more I played with it, it started running, and now it's actually running pretty good and idling pretty good. But the throttle is still sticky, so I'm gonna go through and pull the carb off, clean everything up, because it's not good for that throttle just to hang open. You may not need it to blow, wide open all the time. So stick around. I'll show you how to pull the carb and clean it really well and put it back together. So the first thing we got to do on this one, get this breather box out of the way. Just squeeze these two detents together. That'll come off. Pull your air filter off. That one's pretty nasty. Got a good bit of dirt and debris on it. Set that to the side. And you got two there and there. You can see those. Yep. 2 bolts you got to take out, 2 screws. And should be 8 mil. Sometimes Stihl makes them off. They'll be like a 7 mil or some crap. And Stihl is really bad about putting their stuff so close that you can barely get a normal socket on there. Stuff is, the wall of the socket is too thick, and you kind of shove it down in there. But with enough effort, you can usually make it work. Yeah, it's a 8 mil. And this thing is just covered in oil and junk. There's a first nut. Shove that down on there. Second nut. And then you can wiggle this breather box base out of the way, and there's your carb. I don't really think it's the inside of the carb that's so nasty. I think it's just the top of it. There's a gasket there. So a lot of these, to get the carb off, you end up having to pull this cover too, because of the throttle cable. The way they run the throttle cable is really hard to get to without pulling this. So there's a Torx T27. There's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. This one actually has 4, but the top one's missing. Let's take those out.
Slide the orange cover off. And there's your, hey buddy, there's your throttle cable assembly. Right there. The cable runs around through here, goes up to the top. So you have to reach in, push the butterfly open, and then push your cable with your other finger, and it'll slide out of the holder on the carb. And you got fuel lines running to the bottom. Just take a flathead and pry those off, and it's a good idea to open your gas tank lid a little bit, because if the lid's tight when you pry these off, a lot of times the pressure will make gas come up out of the lines. This front one here is going to be your return line. The back one is the main fuel line. There you go. There's your carb. That's the main fuel line coming in from the tank. That's your return line going back to the tank. And the butterfly is actually not that sticky. Must be the cable. Yep. So it's got a cable running from here, down, around, up through the handle, then back to the trigger. There's just a ton of junk down inside there. Work it back and forth a few times, spray it a little bit, see if we can clean it. Worst case scenario, need a new cable, but I doubt the customer will want that. They'll probably just put up with a sticky trigger. But it won't hurt to spray off this carb. And there's a little fuel in the bubble, so I'll show you when you squeeze it. Comes out the return line there. But everything inside the carb seems alright. I'll open up the bottom and double check that screen down in there. If it's clean down here, I'm not going to pull the top. I don't want to risk messing up a gasket. Oh no. Ha. I'm glad I did pull it. Alright, let's see if I can show you this. So right here, there's a wire mesh screen inside there. Main fuel going in this line, goes around and doing some magic in here, and then goes through this big gape and goes to the top to get put in through the jets. And there's a mesh screen there to catch anything in case you get a hole in your line or your filter comes off inside the tank. And this thing is packed full. It looks like sawdust. I don't know how it was running. Maybe that's why it wasn't wanting to crank. So just take some carb cleaner and spray that out. If you need to, you can pull the mesh screen out, but sometimes they can be a pain to get back in there. So I'm just going to try to spray this one out and see if it'll come clean. There we go. Shiny metal screen in there. It's like a last line of defense before it gets in and messes up the jets and stuff. Needles. It's not Yeah, I don't know the exact terminology. Sometimes there's jets, sometimes there's needles, metering rods, whatever you want to call them. Magic carburetor parts. So I'll put that back together, and that makes me think I should look down in the tank, make sure the line doesn't have a hole in it, and with the filter's on the right line. I've seen people put filter on their own line before. Tighten that back down. Fuel tank, and of course it's full of gas, so you can barely see anything. I was hoping I could fish it out, but don't look like it. There's a vent for the tank. You can leave that in there. I'm just trying to see what all I can see. You can take a flathead and get underneath the fuel lines. If you're really careful, you can pry them out without poking a hole in them. Poke a hole in them, you have to get new fuel lines. They're formed, molded lines, so just a normal straight fuel line won't work. Alright, those are fuel lines. There's our fuel filter. Trying to get it out of there. Oh man. Let's look. I don't see any holes. Filter's old. It's still got the mesh screen all the way around. So I don't really know how all that dirt got in there. Just happens, I guess. So, put this back together. And this base acts as a grommet where it goes into the tank. Is molded and stuff so a certain way. It's got a flat side over here, and it's rounded this way. That flat side is going to go against a hard edge over here. If you try to put it in that way, it won't really go just right, and it won't seal off. So just look and see which way it came out, and make sure you put it back in the same way. It's another hard part. I'll try to do without poking a hole in it. Sometimes I use Phillips head or this Torx bit. It's not as pointy. It may not work though. I may have to use a Phillips or flat. Okay, got the fuel lines back in. And then I'll start putting the carburetor back on. Remember, the bubble goes out towards you where you can get to it. Tight squeeze. Make sure your gasket's still on there against the head. Put your main line on the back. Return line in the front. Now you can try your primer, make sure it's still priming. Don't sound the best, but it's trying. Then the tricky part, throttle cable. So line up the catch part on your throttle linkage. I can't really show you, it's too close up in there. Then thread your cable through. And release it with this hand so it springs back and catches. And no change. It's still stiff on the throttle, but there's not much I can do there unless I want to replace the linkage and cable and everything. And I doubt they'll want to do that. But at least the carburetor's clean. Don't have to worry about it shutting off while they're using it or being hard to crank. Put your gasket back on there and your base plate. Your two 8mm nuts. Be a little easier to start them with your fingers because they'll try to fall up inside of a socket.